The Peugeot e-3008 offers quite an interesting proposition for those looking at a fully electric vehicle, not only due to its stylish design, but also due to the platform that Stellantis have chosen for this vehicle. More on that a little bit later. Now, what you should know is that at the time of filming and in the UK, it's available with a front-wheel drive configuration and a 73 kilowatt-hour battery pack only. Now, at a later date in 2025, you will have a front-wheel drive configuration with a larger battery pack. You'll also have an all-wheel drive configuration with the same battery pack, and you also have a plug-in hybrid model. Now, at the time of filming and in the UK, it's also available in two trims. You have got the Allure that starts from roughly £45,500 and the GT from roughly £49,500. So in this review, you can see if it's actually worth its price tag and how it compares to some of its key competitors. So to kick things off, I would like to talk about its electric range. Now, the one I am testing and the one that's currently available is the standard range model with a 73 kilowatt-hour battery pack. That gives it a quoted range between 318 to 379 miles. Now, it's worth pointing out over here that a heat pump does not come included as standard, and indeed will cost you an additional £700, which is quite disappointing because a lot of other manufacturers actually include a heat pump as standard. Now, nonetheless, the model that I'm actually driving does actually have a heat pump included, and it's the GT trim to be more specific. Now, for my own mixed driving test, I actually netted a very impressive 275 to 295 miles. Now, it's a scorching day out today. However, I do suspect that most people will be able to attain such range from its battery pack, and just goes to show that having a vehicle built from the ground up as a fully electric vehicle really does bolster the overall efficiency. As you'll be able to see over here from the mileage leaderboard, it actually fares very well in comparison to some of its key competitors. For example, the likes of the Tesla Model Y and the likes of the Kia Niro EV, the Hyundai Kona Electric, and also the likes of even the Ioniq 5 or even some of the alternatives out there. Now, apart from that, the vehicle does also have 3 different regenerative braking modes, and I emphasize this because it's the first time I've come across it on a Stellantis vehicle. Thanks to the flappy paddles that are behind the steering wheel, you can adjust the regenerative braking feel. So right now, if I lift off at 50 miles an hour, it actually decelerates pretty harshly. If I were to go down on the levels and go to the lowest mode, and here I will be able to lift off, you'll be able to see over here the vehicle coasts a bit more. Now, it's absolutely fantastic to see this degree of customization because this wasn't previously present on other vehicles from the Stellantis group and equally from some of its competitors. Although saying that, it is a shame that one pedal driving is still not available. So even in its harshest regenerative braking mode, it will still roll at roughly 4 miles an hour, which makes it a little bit more cumbersome to drive in and around town. Now, aside from recouping energy while on the move, you do also have the ability to plug it in. And here, via CCS port, it will take up to 160 kilowatts of input. Therefore, via an appropriate charge point, you can go from 20 to 80% in a mere 20 minutes. If you find a 100 kilowatt charger instead, it will take roughly 30 minutes. Now, connecting it up via this Type 2 port, you will be pleased to know that it has an 11 kilowatt onboard charger. And therefore, if you do have access to a 3-phase power supply, you can go from 0 to 100% in 7 hours. If you do not have access to this and you have a regular 7 kilowatt wall box, this time extends up to 10.5 hours. You can, of course, plug it in via regular 3-pin input, but this will take in excess of 30 hours. Moving swiftly on, let's talk about performance. And yet again, as a reminder, the model on review has got the 73 kilowatt-hour battery pack and a front-mounted motor only. At a later date, you'll have an all-wheel drive model, and you'll also have another one that has got a longer range. Now, as such, the front-wheel drive model that is on review has got 157 kilowatts of power. That equates to 210 horsepower. It dispatches 345 newton meters of torque to the front wheels. Now, using Race Logic's Performance Box Touch, I had it tested from 0 to 20 miles an hour in 2.48 seconds, 0 to 30 miles an hour in 3.72 seconds, 0 to 60 miles an hour in 8.5 seconds, which is pretty much on par with the manufacturer's claim, and 50 to 70 miles an hour in 4.54 seconds. I also clocked in a peak acceleration of 0.39 Gs. Top speed is electronically limited to 105 miles an hour. So its overall performance is a little lackluster, especially if you compare it with some other front or rear wheel drive alternatives, let alone some all-wheel drive vehicles out there on the market. Granted, the latter is a bit of an unfair comparison. Now, in this respect, I do feel that the vehicle will certainly suffice for most consumers, specifically if you consider the overall class. In this respect, I would also like to mention that the overall driver's input is actually really good. This is in part thanks to the fact that you've got a compact steering wheel. And if you're going to be going around winding country routes, you'll feel that the vehicle does respond extremely well. There's also very little body lean, which is quite surprising. But on the flip side, it does mean that its suspension system has been tuned a little bit harder, and as such means that you'll be able to feel some of the speed bumps, the anomalies and the potholes. And this is going to be certainly of importance for those people who are just going to be pottering around town. It's certainly no match to one of the other vehicles from the Stellantis group, and that is from the Citroën EC4 or the EC4X, which have got that floaty-like experience. This is due to the fact that the Peugeot e-3008 has got an independent Peugeot MacPherson coil spring setup at the front with hydraulic dampers, while at the rear you have got independent wheels with multi-link axle and a hydraulic damper system. Now, in terms of the overall braking performance, it's not exactly the best. At the front, you've got 365 by 37mm disc brakes, while at the rear, you've got 356 by 26mm discs. The combination means that it's decent, but if you're going to be comparing it with some of the sportier SUVs out there on the market, it doesn't quite compete. So therefore, you'll just have to make sure that you are aware of the overall braking point that this vehicle can actually achieve. So aside from how it's on the road, what about when it comes to its interior design? Well, here I've got no complaints whatsoever. I really do love what Peugeot have done with the iCockpit design. You've got a 21-inch wraparound screen, which is centered towards the driver, which certainly has got its benefits because it's a lot easier to interact with. Although the same couldn't be quite said if you are sat on the front passenger seat, because in this respect, the infotainment system is a little bit harder to reach and a little bit harder to see. Nonetheless, it's also good to see here that the manufacturer has retained physical buttons on the steering wheel, and no, they're not haptic buttons, so they still have that physical touch and do not have any sort of mistouch operation. And then you've got some few physical buttons found towards the center console. For example, the likes of basic climate control settings and also a volume wheel and also your drive mode selector. Now, I do also really appreciate the fact that the manufacturer has preserved the iToggles. These are small little customizable settings that can be found via the center of the dashboard and effectively give you a shortcut to anything on the infotainment system. It's great thinking by the manufacturer, and just given the fact you've got that customization, allows you to play around with however you like. Now, as for the infotainment system itself, it's also very responsive, fluid, and also supports Android Auto and Apple CarPlay over a wired and wireless transmission, both of which are very much appreciated. You do also have the instrument cluster, which is really detailed, provides you all the key information that you'll require, and is also somewhat customizable with the different menus. Now, it's worth pointing out, however, that there is no head-up display, be it as standard in the GT trim or available as an option, which might come as a disappointment to certain individuals, but given that the wraparound screen does actually serve as somewhat of a midway between where your normal instrument cluster would sit and where the head-up display would be, I've got no real complaints. Now, elsewhere, I would also like to point out that you've got a stock 6-speaker audio system, which is actually pretty punchy across the board. If, however, you really want to take things up a notch, you'll want to go for the Focal audio system. This will come in at 690 watts of power with 10 speakers, and is only comprised within the Sensation Pack, which will set you back a whopping £1,200. So next up we get onto storage, and here at the front of the center console you have got a smartphone wireless charger, which comes included as standard across the entire trim range. Just below it, you'll find two USB Type-C ports, one of which is used to connect up to the infotainment system, and a 12-volt socket. You've also got a small little area over here which can be concealed. The glove box, unfortunately, has not been optimized for right-hand drive vehicles, which I do think is quite a shame. Nonetheless, you've got plenty of extra storage towards the center armrest compartment, and this can also be customized to a certain degree with the small little removable tray. Now, the front door bins has actually been lined with fabric, which is very much appreciated as it prevents loose change or indeed keys from rattling about. They're also pretty large as they'll accommodate a 500ml bottle alongside some small to medium sized valuables. The same couldn't be quite said at the rear, where the door bins are not as large and also have not been lined in any sort of fabric material. In the GT trim, you will also have a pulled down armrest compartment which reveals two cup holders and a smartphone holder. And then finally, towards the rear portion of the center console, you'll also find two further USB Type-C ports, which are both used for charging only. Now, of course, you do also have its boot, where you've got a sizable 588 litres to play around with, or 1,663 litres if you drop down the seats. This is actually pretty impressive, specifically in the all-electric market, and very much goes toe-to-toe with some of its main competitors. It's also very practical with that hatchback design, 40-20-40 rear split folding seats, and a sizable underfloor compartment as well. Very much handy if you want to take certain charging cables, or of course if you just want to compartmentalize your boot. Now, it's worth pointing out that you've also got an electric tailgate that comes fitted as standard in the GT trim, but in all the trim levels you will not find a front compartment, in other words a frunk. But nonetheless, given the amount of space you've got in the boot, I've not got any major complaints. So aside from transporting goods, what about when it comes to seating comfort? Well, here at the front I've got no complaints whatsoever. The driving position is perfect and the seats themselves are very accommodating and soft. The same couldn't be quite said, however, at the rear, where the headroom is actually decent, but the legroom is pretty limited, at least for someone like myself who's just under 6 foot. Of course, this will be a non-issue if you have children or younger adults, but it's just worth pointing out, even if the manufacturer has optimized the rear footwell design. Now here, it is also worth highlighting that in the GT trim, you'll have a heated steering wheel that comes fitted as standard. However, in the Allure, it will be available only as an option. As for the seats themselves, they're available in a fabric finish in the Allure, and this moves over to Alcantara in the GT. A Napa leather finish is also available between £1,000 to £1,600. This is between the different options that you can go for. The cheaper option adds AGR seats and heated front seats and heated rear seats, while the more expensive option adds electronic controls, a memory function, ventilation, and a massage function as well. It would have been great if some of these actually were included as standard, such as, for example, front and rear heated seats and also a heated steering wheel across the entire trim range. Nonetheless, if you do also want a panoramic roof, you'll have to splash out £900 on the Allure and £1,200 on the Sensation Pack, which does indeed include the sunroof in the GT model. Next up, we get on to something quite subjective, and that is its exterior design. I'll be curious to know what you make of it down in the comment section below. Subjectively, I really do love what Peugeot have done with their modern vehicles, and the e-3008 is no different. You have got this accentuated look towards the front with an aggressive headlight design and even daytime running headlights, specifically in the GT trim, and its really nice sort of grille, which stretches out from the middle. Towards the side, it's actually got that sort of sporty flair, thanks to the fact you've got 19-inch alloys in the Allure and 20-inch alloys in the GT. You've also got a nice sort of look towards the rear, and this is due to its integrated spoiler. This is actually a nod to the previous generation models. The rear itself is actually pretty classy, and that is due to the way that the taillights have been designed alongside the overall boot. Now, in terms of the colours, as standard it comes in Obsession Blue, which I really do love. If, however, you want a choice of two of the grey finishes, a blue, a black or a white, it'll cost you an additional £750. This brings me on to safety. Now, at the time of filming, it hasn't been tested by Euro NCAP, so I can't give you any sort of crash analysis. However, I can talk about the driver assistance systems. And as standard, you've got Advanced Emergency Braking System, Post-Collision Safety Brake, Driver Attention Alert, Lane Keeping Assist, Speed Limit and Traffic Sign Recognition, and Cruise Control. This moves over to Adaptive Cruise Control in the GT trim. Speaking of which, if you do want adaptive cruise control in the Allure model, you'll have to splash out £700 on the 360 Vision and Drive Pack. This will also bring long-range blind spot monitoring system, high beam assist, a 4-camera system, and front sensors. This pack is also available in the GT trim for £600, but this instead gives you driver attention warning, rear cross traffic alert, and also highway assist 2.0, which is effectively steering support when you're on the motorway. Very much appreciated for those more mundane drives. Now, I would also like to highlight that it's actually very easy to disable any of the systems via the eye toggles. Indeed, the shortcuts give you access to the certain setting on the infotainment system, and for example, if you do want to disable lane keeping assist, you can do so by a touch of 2 buttons. Good thinking from the manufacturer, and something that I wish that others actually looked into. Now, in terms of parking and visibility, it's actually pretty good. You've got a 10.6 meter turning circle, and as standard, you've also got rear parking sensors and a high resolution rear camera. However, the front visibility is a little bit limited due to the positioning of the rear view mirror, and it's a complaint that I've had about other vehicles from the Stellantis group. As for the side, it's actually pretty large, so it's very easy to check over your shoulder for your blind spot. And as for the rear, you've got a decent opening as well. So with all that in mind, it brings us on to our verdict. And truthfully, the Peugeot e-3008 does actually tick quite a few boxes. It's stylish both inside and out. It's loaded with technology within the cabin and also a good degree of driver assistance systems. It's also really engaging to drive and also has got a fantastic electric range, which isn't the same that could be said about some of its competitors. And while the overall suspension system is a little bit stiff and the rear occupancy space is a bit limited, it should still suffice for most consumers. So given the fact that you've got a large amount of space when it comes to its boot. As a result of this, and given its overall price tag that it comes in at, we can see ourselves recommending it, and as such it gets our Best Buy award. Now we'd be curious to know what you make of the e-3008 down in the comment section below, and if you would pick it over some of its competitors. Now if you have enjoyed this detailed independent review, definitely do consider dropping a like, subscribing and hitting that bell notification, all of which would be greatly appreciated. As such, I've been Chris from TotallyEV, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves, and goodbye.